I'm an 8th grade teacher, and in my wait a minute. I was going to ask Bonnie. Oh, there's Bonnie back there. In my Bible class this week, I gave a test, and one person got 100, and that was Bonnie. And so I'm going to show you how brilliant she is. I'm going to ask her a question this morning. Bonnie, what day is it today? I told you. Okay, now, since it's Mother's Day, I'm going to talk about mothers, or a mother this morning. You know, the Bible has a lot of outstanding mothers, and I'd like to have you turn to a passage that tells about one of them quite at length. 1 Samuel, first chapter. I wonder if anybody can tell me who that is before they turn there. Hannah. Oh, got a lot of Bible students. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm talking about Ron's mother this morning. Okay. All right, now, Hannah is a wonderful lady, and she lived at a very important time. I'd like to have you look, first of all, at chapter 3, verse 1, to give you some little inkling of the day in which Hannah lived. She lived in a day of spiritual darkness and need in Israel. And this is given to us, well, of course, if you read the book leading up, or the books leading up to the book of 1 Samuel, know that it was a very great day of spiritual need. The book of Judges leads into the book of Samuel, and you know that the times are expressed in a number of places in the book of Judges by saying, everybody did that which is right in his own eyes. They just did what they wanted to do. And consequently, you see just chaos in Israel during the times of the Judges, especially in the latter days. And now this was the day in which Hannah lived. Things were bad in Israel. And in the first verse of chapter 3 it says, "And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was precious in those days." There was no open vision. The Revised Version, or my Schofield here, says the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. Now, this kind of gives you a picture of the days that there was it was a time in which God's Word was just seldom met with. And we need to get something out of this passage for ourselves, and I think that we can say today is a very needy day in which we live. It's a day of darkness, it's a day of great spiritual need. And even though in our land there is lots of Bible preaching, there's lots of circulation of the Scriptures and so forth, yet the Word of the Lord is precious even in our day in the same sense that it was in that day. That is, that there were very few people speaking in the power of the Spirit of God. So that there's a great dearth in our land of people who know what God is doing and what God is saying. For most people, In America today, God is very remote, and most people are very unconcerned about what God's program or what His interests, what His desires are. God is the least of their worries. And this was the kind of day that it was in Israel. Now, what did God do in reaction to that? Because God reacts to circumstances that we find in the world. God moves to do something about it. Now, I think it's very interesting to see that God's reaction to this situation was the most marvelous thing. He found a mother. Isn't that wonderful? He found a mother who had some qualities that we see in Hannah here. But really, what this all issued out into, that Hannah provided the beginning of a movement that led from a dark day in Israel to Israel's heyday, to the greatest day that Israel has ever known. The day of the kingdom. The day of David. Because Samuel, Hannah's son, brought in the kingdom. And really brought in, he was the one to anoint David king. King of Israel. Of course, that was such a great day in Israel that from then on, everything is measured by David. All the kings from then on are said he either did well or he did badly when compared to David. He did not as his father David, or he walked in the ways of his father David. Everything was measured by David. And so, this is the importance of Hannah. She begins this whole thing. And it shows you what a mother can do. How much Hannah was just, she never was any more than just a housewife in Israel. And certainly if God hadn't singled her out and made her great in His Word, nobody would ever have heard of Hannah or known anything about her or thought that she had done anything. But God's ways and His way of measuring things is not like ours. You know, I was thinking not so long ago about the prayers of mothers. And I wonder what world history would be like if all of the prayers of mothers were subtracted from the earth. And all the blessing that has come through the prayers of mothers. Boy, I tell you, it would be a different situation in the world. It would be a very, very different situation. How much God has brought of blessing into the world through the prayers of mothers. Now, let's look at Hannah's life just briefly here this morning. First of all, and I want us to remember, and I'm going to remind you, that what we're seeking to see here is something for our own soul's needs, because Hannah is not just a challenge to mothers, but she's also a challenge to us all. And we all can learn from her. Let's look first of all at verses 1 to 8 in chapter 1 of 1 Samuel. Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he came to Peninnah his wife, or he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her relentlessly, to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to, or as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? Now, I want you to notice first that this whole thing started because Hannah was keenly conscious of a need in her own life. You know, this is so typical that God begins so often by bringing people to consciousness of their need. You know, very often in our lives, brothers and sisters, we get very upset because God gets us into a place where we begin to be troubled about something. And we're very uncomfortable. And we're not in a place of ease and of rest at all. We're unrestful, we're uncomfortable, we're dissatisfied. And we have a sense that God has brought this situation about, and we begin to get a little really resentful and bitter toward God. Now this happens so often, and yet if we really believe the Bible and really search through the Scriptures, we see that God so often started a program of blessing by doing this in people's lives. Now, God, you see, had shut up her womb. You'd say, well, Lord, wasn't that mean? Here, Hannah wanted a child so bad, and why didn't you give her one? You know, it wasn't mean at all. God was bringing great blessing. Hannah has been in heaven for over 3,000 years now. And how she has praised the Lord for all those 3,000 years that He shut up her womb. Oh, I can imagine how she does. She even did it here on earth. And, when we get to heaven, we're going to praise the Lord for our troubles and our trials. Oh, Lord, I'm so glad that you brought that into my life. Because I can see now that it was the only way that I would have really come into your program for me and been of any value to anybody else. And so let's not get impatient. Let's not get bitter toward the Lord. Let's not turn away from Him because He brings difficulties and trials into our life. Because one day we're going to praise Him for it. If we hang on in faith. So Hannah was keenly conscious, and not only that, you see, not only was her womb shut up, not only did she want to have children, but then God saw to it that this adversary of her, this other wife, you see, was poking her all the time. Just making her even worse, feel worse about it than she would have otherwise. Now, the Lord had ordered all of that in mercy and in love. The second thing I want you to notice in verses 9 through 18 is that she was an Israelite indeed who knew where to go with her need. She was an Israelite indeed. We were reading in the Sunday school class this morning the place where Jesus said that. He said, "Behold, an Israelite indeed," to Nathanael, as Nathanael came toward him. And then Nathanael, he told Nathanael, "I saw thee under the fig tree." I'm sure, or at least I believe, that what Nathanael was doing under that fig tree was the place where he really prayed and poured out his heart in prayer. Because an Israelite, you see, you remember where that name was given was back when Jacob was wrestling with the angel. And where he told God, he was really wrestling with God. And it's a figure, you see. It's a little picture of prayer. And here was Jacob wrestling with God in prayer. And you remember, finally he'd gotten in Jacob's life. He always was working things out himself. Always scheming. Always trying to work out his own problems himself. And finally God got him to the place where he had nowhere else to turn. He couldn't work his problems out. And he was up against the wall. And finally he went up and poured out his heart to God and said, "Oh, God, help me." And not only that, he said, "God, I'm not going to let you go until you do." And so, Israelites, you see, were people who knew how to get a hold of God. Who knew how to lay hold on God and say, "Lord, you're my only hope. You've got to help me, or else I'm lost. I just have no other help." And this was, of course, what Nathanael, I think, was doing under the fig tree. He was pouring out his heart to God in prayer. And Jesus said, "Nathanael, I saw you under that fig tree." And that's what broke Nathanael. You remember, he had gone to Jesus in unbelief. He said to Philip, his friend, he said, "Jesus can't be the Messiah because you say he's from Nazareth, and the Messiah is not coming from Nazareth, he's coming from Bethlehem. He can't be the Messiah." And Philip said to him, "You just come and see him." And that's what Jesus said to him when he saw him. He said, I'm the one that's been meeting with you under that fig tree." Nathanael went down before him and said, "Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel." Well, I'll bet you he said that with tears. I'll bet you he said that with fear. On his knees he said that. And now we have another Israelite. Let's read it. Verse 9 in 1 Samuel, first chapter. "So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh." By the way, that's where the tabernacle was. They still were worshiping in the tabernacle. This was before the days of the temple. The tabernacle was pretty dilapidated by this time, but it was still there. "And after they had drunk, now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord." It was the tabernacle, really. "And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a male child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head." That meant that he was to be given to the Lord. He was to be a Nazirite. "And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli observed her mouth. Now Hannah, she spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought that she was drunk. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid as a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I been speaking. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way, and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. See, she got through. She knew she had her petition that she had desired of the Lord. She got up, she went down on her knees in brokenness, and she got up with faith. What a wonderful thing. She got what she asked. She said, Lord, I won't let you go until you bless me. An Israelite indeed. And God did bless her. Now, this is the great need with each one of us, brothers and sisters, and that is that we not only sense our need, but we know where to go to get it fulfilled. And not only that, but we go there and we get it. We will not take no for an answer. We don't go half-heartedly and say, and then, oh, God didn't answer my prayer, and go away and pout about it. No, we go and we absolutely refuse to give up. We absolutely refuse to give over our faith. But we believe with all of our hearts that God's going to meet our need and answer our prayer. And this is the kind of spirit that God hearkens to. This is the Israelitish spirit. This is the kind of spirit that God says, I value that so much, I'm going to name all my people that. Israel. Isn't that something? God values what He saw in Jacob that day, or that night, by this brook Jabbok, where he spent all night wrestling with God in prayer. God values that so much that He says, I'm going to name all my people that. In faith, in hope, that they'll all be like that. And here we find, this was a long time after Jacob, but here we find a woman who was one of his children that took up his spirit. And she got what she asked for. She got up and her countenance was no more sad. Now the third thing is that what she got from the Lord to meet her need, which was Samuel, she gave back to God and did not keep for herself. That's something, isn't it? She didn't say, oh, thank you, Lord, oh, now I've got this, and she goes away and she just hoards this to herself. Oh no, she receives it from the Lord, and she says, in fact, even before she got it, she said, Lord, if you'll only give it to me, I'll give it back to you. That was a very, very costly vow that she made. But she kept it. Notice how she kept it. I think this is a beautiful... The Bible's full of such beautiful stories, isn't it? Just as a storybook. You can't find a better book in the world than the Bible. Let's look at verse 11 again, where she vows, and she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a male child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. Now let's read from 19 to 28. And they rose up in the morning early and worshipped before the Lord and returned. Isn't this a beautiful picture of a godly family? This Elkanah was a godly man too. You see, they went up there year by year, and a lot of people weren't going up. That's the thing. There were a lot of people. In fact, I'd say the majority of Israel. What were they doing? They were doing what they wanted to do. Just going here and there, They just were throwing their lusts around and doing just what they good and well pleased. But not Elkanah and his family. No, sir. They went up to the Lord, or went up to the tabernacle and worshipped the Lord when they were supposed to. And here they are. They returned and came to their house at Ramah, and Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived, that she bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. By the way, so that's what Samuel means. Ask of God. Asked of God. And the name Elkanah, and the man Elkanah, and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice, and his vow. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child is weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. And Elkanah her husband said unto her, Do what seemeth to thee good. Tarry until thou hast weaned him. Only the Lord establish his word. See, Elkanah is just gently reminding her, now don't you go back on your vow now. See, he knew what she had vowed. And, it was a terrible thing to go back on a vow that you made to God. Still is. And so Elkanah is saying, okay, but it's going to be harder and harder the longer you leave him there. Let go of that little boy. Your only little boy. Isn't that something? Boy, what a sacrifice. So the woman abode and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks, and 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition which I asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshipped the Lord there. Boy, I should say he worshipped the Lord. There is true worship. You remember when Abraham went up with Isaac to offer him on Mount Moriah? You remember what he told the men that were with him before the servants that stayed back? He said, you stay here. And he says, Isaac and I will go up on yonder mountain and worship. Now there was real worship, you see. Worship where Abraham was willing to give the most precious thing he had to God. And that's exactly what you have here, you see. True worship. Hannah coming up, offering a bullock, offering a skin of wine, offering this and that. But oh, the true worship, you see, was that Hannah was offering the most precious thing she had, her little boy. How her heart must have broken as she left him there that day and went back home. But she remained true to her vow. And this is another thing, brothers and sisters, that needs to somehow get into our life. And that is that we offer to the Lord the very best that He has given us. You see, that most heartfelt prayer that we have gone through real travail, real painful experience in order to get from the Lord, and then to give that back to the Lord, is where a lot of us balk, isn't it? To give to Him the very best we have is something that not many people do. Let's face it. Not many people come to this place. And consequently, you see, this is where a lot of blessing is held up in our own lives, and a lot of blessing that would come forth to the world is held up right here. It's because we will not give to the Lord things that are the most precious to us. We give Him second-rate things that we feel that we can get along without. But we don't give Him the best. And this is something that each one of us needs to examine our hearts before the Lord about. Now, I'd like to have you notice the result, last of all, the result of a godly mother's life. Now, first of all, I'd like to have you notice in chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, that she became a woman of praise and of prophecy. She became a woman who had a mouth full of praise. Let's notice in chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoiceth in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none beside thee. Neither is there any rock like our God. Now this was praise, you see, that just spontaneously welled up from Hannah's heart. Now isn't it something that this praise came forth from her heart spontaneously, just like a gusher, at the very time of her deepest, most costly sacrifice? Isn't that something? Now that shows you that really when we actually come to give our most costly things to the Lord, there is the time of greatest blessing. We think that we are going to lose, and we turn out gaining. And Hannah's heart just overflowed in praise to the Lord, because the Lord poured in blessing into her life, into her heart. And not only that, but Hannah became a prophetess. This was real